"What a lovely house," he sneered, waving the papers. "You, old man, get the tiny laundry room bedroom. My parents take the master. Tara's folks the guest suite. My sisters brood the basement. Your job is to keep us all housed and fed." They expected me to crumble. Instead, I stood slowly, smiled wide, and spoke just 3 words. The blood drained from every face in the room. They froze in sheer terror. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now. My name is Robert Coleman. I'm 68 years old, and I live in Austin, Texas. Spent 42 years as an architect and real estate developer before stepping back from the daily grind. Always believe that the home you build with your own hands means more than any amount of money. I designed my house in Tarrytown 23 years ago. Every window placement, every door frame, every corner of the 3,847 square feet was deliberate. 4 bedrooms, 3.5 bathrooms, a workshop in the back where I restore antique clocks. This wasn't just a house, it was my masterpiece. My son Craig used to run through these halls as a boy, sliding in his socks on the hardwood floors I'd spent weeks selecting. My daughter Rachel would sit on the kitchen counter, swinging her legs while I made her favorite pancakes. Those memories feel like they belong to someone else's life now. The change didn't happen overnight. With Craig, it started about 3 years ago when he met Tara. She was beautiful, I'll give her that, with perfect blonde hair and a smile that could sell ice to penguins. She worked in HR at some mid-sized company, and she was good at her job. Too good, maybe. She knew exactly how to package selfish desires as reasonable requests, how to make manipulation sound like concern. Craig had always been a bit lazy, always looking for shortcuts, but Tara amplified it. Before her, he at least pretended to care about building his own life. After her, it became all about what I owed them. What he deserved from me. He worked as a sales manager at Tech Vision Solutions, pulling in a decent salary, but they lived beyond their means. Designer clothes, expensive restaurants, a lifestyle they couldn't actually afford. Rachel, my daughter, took a different path to disappointment. Divorced at 34, 2 kids, ages 11 and 9, and a permanent victim mentality. Everything was always someone else's fault. Her ex-husband Trey's fault for not supporting her dreams. Her boss's fault for not promoting her. My fault for not helping enough. She worked as an assistant manager at a shopping mall, barely making ends meet, but somehow that was also my responsibility to fix. It started innocuously about 3 months ago. Craig called one evening. "Hey, Dad, Tara and I were thinking of dropping by tomorrow for coffee. That okay?" Of course it was okay. They were my son and daughter-in-law. The next morning they arrived with pastries and warm smiles. Tara walked through the house like she was seeing it for the first time, even though she'd been here dozens of times before. "Robert, this house is absolutely stunning," she said, running her hand along the custom banister. "Craig never told me you designed it yourself. That's incredible." I felt a small surge of pride. "Thank you, Tara. It was a labor of love." She pulled out her phone and started taking photos. "Do you mind? I'm just so inspired by the architecture. The way the light comes through these windows." What could I say? It seemed harmless. The visits became more frequent. Coffee turned into lunch. Lunch turned into dinner. Dinner turned into, "It's getting late. Mind if we crash in the guest room?" I noticed Tara measuring doorways with her eyes, making little notes in her phone. Once I caught her pacing off the master bedroom, counting her steps. "Just admiring the space," she said with that 1,000-watt smile. "You're so lucky to have all this room." Lucky. As if I hadn't worked 60-hour weeks for 4 decades to afford it. Then Tara's parents entered the picture. Donald and Cynthia Sanders arrived one Sunday afternoon, summoned by their daughter for what Craig called a family lunch. Donald was a retired regional insurance manager who acted like he'd personally invented the concept of success. Cynthia was a homemaker who'd never worked a day in her life, but somehow felt qualified to judge everyone else's choices. "So this is the famous house," Donald said, looking around my living room like he was evaluating it for purchase. "Must be expensive to maintain for just one person." "I manage fine," I replied evenly. "Still," Cynthia chimed in, her voice dripping with false concern, "it does seem like a lot of space for someone your age, Bob." I hate being called Bob. My name is Robert. She knew this. Robert, I corrected gently. She waved her hand dismissively. Of course, Robert. I just mean don't you worry about the stairs. What if you fell? Who would know? I'm 68, not 88. I play chess twice a week at Central Texas Chess Club, work in my clock shop, and can still climb a ladder better than most 40-year-olds. But Cynthia had already decided I was one step from the nursing home. The visits from Donald and Cynthia became regular, too. They'd show up unannounced, peer into rooms, ask intrusive questions about my finances, my retirement accounts, my estate planning. Donald actually asked me once if I had long-term care insurance, then followed up with, because at your age, these things happen fast. Meanwhile, Rachel started calling more frequently, always with some new crisis. Her car broke down, her landlord raised the rent, the kids needed new school supplies. Could I help, just this once? Every conversation ended with a request for money, wrapped in tears and guilt. Dad, I'm barely making it, she'd sob into the phone. After the divorce, Trey pays so little in child support, I'm drowning here. I helped. I always helped, but it was never enough, and the requests grew bolder. The pattern continued for 3 months. Visit after visit, question after question, measurement after measurement. I'm not naive. I knew something was brewing. I just didn't know what until that phone call. It was a Wednesday evening. I was in my workshop, carefully adjusting the escapement wheel on an 1890s mantel clock, when my phone rang. Craig, Dad, we need to talk. The whole family is coming over this Sunday at 2 p.m. It's important. Not, can we come over? Not, are you free? Just an announcement. What's this about, Craig? We'll discuss it when we're all together. See you Sunday. The line went dead. I set down my tools and stared at the half-repaired clock. In my 42 years of architecture and development, I'd learned to read blueprints that weren't yet drawn, to anticipate structural problems before they appeared. This conversation had all the warning signs of a catastrophic foundation failure. Sunday at 2 p.m., the whole family. Whatever they were planning, it was coordinated, rehearsed, and designed to leave me no room for negotiation. I had 3 days to figure out what was coming. 3 days before my own family walked through my front door with a plan that would change everything. I didn't sleep well those 3 nights. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling I'd designed to be exactly 9 feet high, tall enough to feel spacious, low enough to heat efficiently, and run through possibilities. They wanted money. That was the obvious answer. But why the whole family? Why the elaborate build-up? My mind kept returning to a conversation from years ago. Craig was maybe 16, angry that I wouldn't buy him a new car for his birthday. This house is huge, Dad. You've got plenty of money. Why are you being so cheap? I'd tried to explain that the house represented decades of work, careful planning, sacrifice. That money didn't just appear because you wanted it. He'd stormed off, called me selfish. The memory still stung. Back then, I'd thought it was just teenage rebellion. Now I wondered if I'd been watching the seedling of something darker take root. I remembered teaching Craig to ride a bike in the driveway of our old, smaller house, how he'd looked back at me with pure trust, believing I'd never let him fall. I remembered Rachel at 7, presenting me with a crayon drawing of our family, 4 stick figures holding hands in front of a house with a triangle roof. That's us, Daddy. We're happy. When had that trust turned to entitlement? When had love become calculation? I thought about my late wife, Sarah, who died 6 years ago from cancer. She'd been the glue holding our family together, smoothing over the rough edges, translating between my directness and the kids' sensitivity. After she passed, the cracks started showing. Without her buffer, Craig and Rachel had to deal with me directly, and apparently they didn't like what they found. Sarah used to say I was too focused on logic, not enough on emotion. They need to feel loved, Robert, not just provided for. Maybe she was right. Maybe I'd built them a beautiful house, but forgotten to make them feel at home in it. No. I pushed that thought away. I'd done everything I could. I'd paid for Craig's college. I'd covered Rachel's wedding expenses, then helped with her divorce lawyer fees. I'd been there for every milestone, every crisis, every late-night phone call. The problem wasn't what I'd failed to give. It was what they'd failed to appreciate. Sunday arrived with cruel sunshine, the kind of perfect Texas spring day that makes you forget summer will soon turn Austin into an oven. I dressed carefully, khakis and a button-down shirt, the uniform of a respectable retired professional. No point looking like I was ready for a fight. At 1:45 p.m., I stood in my living room, examining it with fresh eyes. The custom built-in bookshelves I'd designed, the fireplace with its craftsman-style mantel, the bay window that caught the afternoon light just right. Every element was intentional, a small piece of a larger vision. By 2 p.m., they started arriving. Craig and Tara came first, Tara's heels clicking on my hardwood floors with the confidence of ownership. Then Donald and Cynthia in their Mercedes, Donald wearing a suit like he was heading to a board meeting. Finally, Rachel with her kids, my grandchildren, who I barely got to see anymore despite living in the same city. They settled into my living room like they were staging an intervention. Craig sat on my favorite chair, the leather one I'd custom ordered after Sarah died, the one that still held the shape of my back from thousands of evenings reading. Tara perched on the arm, her hand on his shoulder in a show of unity. Donald and Cynthia took the sofa. Rachel hovered near the doorway with her kids, who were already bored and fiddling with their phones. I remained standing. Home court advantage. Craig cleared his throat, pulled out a folder like this was a business presentation, and began. Dad, we've all been talking, and we've come to a decision that we think will benefit everyone. Not, we have an idea, or we'd like to discuss something. A decision already made. He continued, You're living here alone in this big house. It's inefficient. It's wasteful. And frankly, at your age, it's not safe. I felt my jaw tighten but said nothing. Let him dig his own hole. So we've decided, the family has decided, that we're going to move in. Permanently. The word hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Tara jumped in, her voice saccharine. It'll be wonderful, Robert. A full house again. Family dinners. The kids running around. Just like old times. We've already worked out the logistics, Craig said, opening his folder. He actually had a floor plan printed out, with rooms labeled. Tara and I will take the master bedroom upstairs. It's the largest, and we need the space. Donald and Cynthia will take the guest bedroom with the ensuite bathroom. They're getting older and need convenient facilities. I watched Donald nod approvingly, as if Craig had just made a brilliant strategic decision. Rachel and the kids will take the finished basement, Craig continued. It's practically a separate apartment down there. And you, Dad? He looked up from his papers with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. We'll set you up in the small bedroom on the first floor, next to the laundry room. It's perfect for you. Close to everything, no stairs to worry about. The room they wanted to give me was 140 square feet. I knew because I'd designed it as a storage room and grudgingly converted it into a bedroom when Rachel was a teenager and wanted her friends to sleep over. It had one small window, no closet, and the constant hum of the washing machine through the walls. I looked at each of them in turn. Craig, my son who was dividing up my house like a corporate asset. Tara, smiling like she'd just proposed something generous. Donald and Cynthia, already mentally redecorating their future bedroom. Rachel, avoiding my eyes but nodding along. And my role in this arrangement? I asked quietly. Tara brightened. Oh, we've thought about that too. You'll be so helpful. You can make breakfast for everyone. You always made the best pancakes. And Rachel's kids will need someone to watch them after school before she gets home from work. You'll have so much to keep you busy. They wanted my house. They wanted me as their live-in servant. And they were presenting it as if they were doing me a favor. I felt something shift inside me, like a gear clicking into place in one of my antique clocks. The mechanism that had been wound tight for 3 months suddenly found its purpose. I slowly stood up from where I'd been leaning against the wall. I smiled, a real smile, the kind that comes when you realize you're 3 moves ahead in a chess game and your opponent hasn't seen the trap yet. Then I said 3 words that made the blood drain from their faces. Congratulations on your purchase. The room went absolutely silent. Even Rachel's kids looked up from their phones. Craig's confident expression crumbled into confusion. What? What purchase? My smile widened. The house you bought. Congratulations. I hope you'll be very happy there. They froze, all of them, like someone had hit pause on a movie, and in that frozen moment of dawning horror, I knew I had them exactly where I wanted them. The silence lasted maybe 5 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. I watched each face process my words, cycling through confusion, disbelief, and finally, beautifully, the first glimmers of panic. Craig recovered first. "What are you talking about? What purchase?" I walked to my desk, my beautiful custom-built walnut desk, with the hidden compartment I'd designed for important documents, and pulled out a manila folder, the same folder I'd been preparing for 2 months, knowing this moment would come. "Yesterday afternoon at 3:30 p.m., you signed a purchase agreement for a property located at 1247 Maple Street, Del Valle, Texas. Purchase price, $847,000. I believe your attorney, James Parker from Austin Legal Group, was present to witness the signing." I watched Craig's face drain of color. Actually drain, I'd always thought that was just an expression, but no. His healthy tan faded to a sickly gray in real time. "Maple Street?" he whispered. "But the document said—" "Let me save you some time," I interrupted, opening the folder. The document said exactly what they were supposed to say. You purchased a house. Just not this house. Tara shot to her feet, her chair scraping against the hardwood floors. "That's impossible. We reviewed everything. The address was 1247 Maple Street," I repeated calmly. "A 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house in Del Valle, 1,623 square feet. You're now the proud owners." I pulled out the first document and laid it on the coffee table. "Here's your signed purchase agreement. Note the address in section 2.1. Tara snatched it up, her manicured nails, French tips, probably cost more than most people's grocery bills, trembling as she scanned the pages. Her lips moved silently, reading the address over and over like it might change if she tried hard enough. "This can't be right," she breathed. "We were buying your house. We had it appraised. We walked through it. You walked through a house," I corrected. "Never specified which one." Donald stood up, puffing his chest like that would make him more intimidating. "This is fraud, Robert. Clear as day. You deliberately misled." "Did I?" I pulled out another document. "Here's the living trust agreement for this property. 3,352 Westlake Drive, Tarrytown. Signed, notarized, and filed with Travis County yesterday afternoon. This house is now held in irrevocable trust by the Austin Architects Heritage Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit organization, registered, legal, and permanent." The word permanent hung in the air like smoke. I watched Rachel, who'd been silent until now, sink onto the arm of the sofa. She'd gone pale too, though she was trying to hide it. My daughter had always been good at playing innocent, at pretending she wasn't part of whatever scheme was unfolding. But I'd seen her text messages to Craig. I knew better. Cynthia found her voice, shrill and accusing. "You had no right. This is your family's inheritance. You can't just give away—" "My property," I said, my voice dropping to a temperature that could freeze water. "My house. My decision. And I didn't give it away. I placed it in a trust for its intended purpose, supporting retired architects and preserving architectural heritage." "But you bought another house just to trick us?" Tara's voice had climbed an octave. "That's insane. That's—" "Strategic," I finished. "I purchased 1,247 Maple Street 2 months ago for $532,000. Overpaid by about $47,000 to expedite the sale. Then I offered it to you through properly executed legal channels for $847,000. You accepted. You had your attorney review everything. You signed." The math was dawning on Craig now. I could see it in his eyes. $315,000, he whispered. "We overpaid by $315,000. "At minimum," I agreed. "The Del Valle market's been declining since they announced that industrial development nearby. 3 new warehouses going up within half a mile. Noise, traffic, air quality issues. That house is worth maybe $532,000 on a good day. You might get $485,000 if you're lucky." I let that sink in. Watched Craig's hands ball into fists. Watched Tara's perfect composure crack like cheap plaster. "Your attorney reviewed all documents," I continued. "All signatures are genuine. All disclosures were made, well, the ones legally required. The fact that you assumed you were buying this house without verifying the address, that's not fraud. That's due diligence failure. Donald's face had gone from red to purple. We'll sue. We'll take this to court, and we'll... Please do, I said, and I meant it. I've prepared for that contingency. I have documentation of every conversation, every text message, every email where you discussed taking over my house. Texas is a one-party consent state for recording conversations, Donald. Did you know that? I've been recording every visit for the past 6 weeks. The room went silent again, different this time, heavier. You recorded us? Rachel finally spoke, her voice small. Your own family? I documented evidence of a coordinated plan to seize my property and reduce me to a servant in my own home. I corrected. Yes, Rachel, I did. Including your text to Craig about how you'd finally be able to quit working once you moved in, and I could babysit full-time. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Cynthia tried one more time. But surely there's some way to fix this, to negotiate. There's nothing to negotiate, I said. You own a house in Del Valle. I have nothing to do with this house anymore. The Austin Architects Heritage Foundation does. You're welcome to contact their board of directors if you have concerns. You're on the board, Craig shouted, finally losing his carefully maintained composure. You probably are the board, I smiled. I'm one of 7 founding members. The others include 3 of my former colleagues, a city planning commissioner, and 2 professors from UT's architecture school, all of whom are quite excited about the foundation's mission and the generous donation of this property. I closed the folder. Now, I believe we're finished here. You have a house to inspect. I'd recommend doing that sooner rather than later. The inspection period in your contract expires in 14 days. They stood there, frozen in various states of shock and fury. Craig's jaw worked soundlessly. Tara had actually started crying. Real tears, not the manipulative ones she usually deployed. Donald and Cynthia looked like they'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Rachel just stared at me like I was a stranger. Maybe I was to them. Maybe I'd always been nothing more than a resource to exploit, a wallet with legs, an old man too stupid and sentimental to protect himself. But I wasn't that man anymore. Get out of my house, I said quietly. All of you. They left, eventually. After more threats, more accusations, more tears from Tara and Rachel. Craig promised lawyers. Donald promised consequences. Cynthia just kept repeating, "How could you?" like it was a magic spell that might change reality. I closed the door behind them and stood in the sudden silence of my home. Their voices still echoed from the driveway, high-pitched arguing that filtered through the walls. Blaming each other, probably, trying to figure out their next move. I walked to my workshop. The unfinished 1890s mantel clock was still there, waiting patiently for me to complete its restoration. I picked up my tools and got back to work. The familiar rhythm of tiny adjustments, the satisfaction of watching precision mechanisms click into place, it centered me. But my mind was racing. This was just the opening move. They'd attack, I knew that. Craig didn't give up easily, and Tara was too clever by half. They'd find lawyers, look for loopholes, try to prove fraud or undue influence or incompetence. Donald and Cynthia had money and connections from his insurance days. Rachel would play the sympathy card, probably bring the kids around to make me feel guilty. I needed to be ready. The next morning, I called Daniel Griffin. Not a friend. I'd found him through referrals, vetted his credentials carefully. A state law specialist with 18 years of experience and a reputation for being thorough, to the point of obsessive. Perfect for what I needed. "Mr. Coleman," his voice was professionally warm when he answered. "I've been expecting your call." "Things went as planned yesterday," I told him. "They're going to come after this hard." "Let them," Daniel said, and I could hear the confidence in his voice. "Everything we did was legal. The trust is ironclad. I've been doing this for nearly 2 decades, and I made certain there are no vulnerabilities. They'll try to prove I'm mentally incompetent, then they'll fail. We have your cognitive assessments from 3 independent neurologists dated over the past 2 months. Perfect scores across the board. IQ of 138. No signs of dementia, confusion, or impaired judgment. One of those doctors is the head of geriatric psychiatry at Del Seaton. Good luck convincing a judge to overturn her professional opinion. I smiled despite myself. You thought of everything. That's what you paid me for. We spent another 20 minutes going over potential attack vectors and our defensive strategies. By the time I hung up, I felt even more confident, but confidence wasn't enough. I needed insurance. That afternoon, I met with Marcus Chow. I'd hired him 3 weeks earlier, a private investigator who'd spent 15 years with the Austin Police Department before going private. Discreet, professional, and expensive. Worth every penny. We met at a small coffee shop on South Congress, away from anywhere my family might see us. Marcus slid a tablet across the table. Everything you asked for? I scrolled through the files. Text messages between Craig and Tara, discussing their plan in detail. Emails from Craig's work account, using company time and resources to coordinate the takeover. Financial records showing they'd maxed out 2 credit cards and taken a personal loan to cover their portion of the down payment. The interesting part, Marcus said, tapping the screen, is the timeline. They started planning this 7 months ago, right after Donald and Cynthia's retirement fund took a hit in the market correction. So this wasn't just about greed, I murmured. They're actually desperate. Desperate people make mistakes, Marcus agreed. Speaking of which, he swiped to another file. Your daughter-in-law has been accessing confidential employee salary information through her HR position. Using it for what looks like social manipulation, she knows exactly what people earn and leverages that in conversations. I stared at the evidence, time-stamped access logs, correlation with her social media activity, patterns of behavior that clearly showed misuse of her position. Can you send this to me? I asked. Already in your secure email. But Robert... Marcus leaned forward. What are you planning to do with this? I don't know yet, I admitted, but I like having options. Over the next several days, the attacks began. Craig's lawyer, a young, aggressive type from a mid-tier firm, filed a lawsuit claiming fraud, undue influence, and elder abuse. The allegations were nonsense, but they required response. Daniel handled it smoothly, filing motions to dismiss with attached evidence that made Craig's claims look absurd. Text messages, recorded conversations. The whole coordinated plan laid bare. Rachel came by crying, begging me to make this right. She brought the kids, my grandchildren, who I barely knew because she'd been too busy to visit unless she needed money. I let them in, made the kids hot chocolate, asked about school. They were good kids, not their fault their mother was a manipulator. When Rachel started her pitch, Dad, please think of the children. They need stability. I cut her off. Rachel, you knew about Craig's plan. You were part of it. You wanted the basement, rent-free, while I babysat full-time so you could quit your job. I never said that. You texted it to Craig. I have copies. She left in tears, kids in tow, shouting about how cruel I'd become. But the real attack came from Donald and Cynthia. They filed a petition with the court to have me evaluated for mental competency, claiming I was showing signs of dementia and had been manipulated into signing away my property. That one actually made me laugh. I voluntarily submitted to every evaluation they requested. 3 different doctors, full neurological workups, cognitive tests, psychiatric assessments. The works. The results came back exactly as I knew they would. Perfect mental health. Superior cognitive function for my age. No signs of impairment whatsoever. The judge who reviewed the petition, a stern woman named Barbara Martinez who'd been on the bench for 20 years, didn't just dismiss it, she verbally eviscerated Donald's attorney in open court for wasting judicial resources and warned that any future frivolous filings would result in sanctions. Donald and Cynthia left the courthouse looking like they'd been physically beaten, but I wasn't done, not even close. I'd been watching, learning, documenting, and I discovered something interesting about Craig's job at TechVision Solutions. His boss was named Robert Sullivan. A quick search of my old university records showed that a Robert Sullivan had taken my advanced structural design course 25 years ago, graduated with honors, left a note in my retirement file about how much my mentorship had meant to his career. Small world. I drafted a careful email, professional, concerned, attaching documentation of Craig's misuse of company resources, those emails from his work account, discussing personal matters, potentially exposing the company to legal liability if anyone discovered an employee using company infrastructure to plan what could be construed as elder abuse. I didn't send it yet, just saved it in my drafts folder. Sometimes the best weapon is the one you haven't fired yet. That evening I sat in my workshop with a glass of scotch, Macallan 18, the good stuff, and examined the mantel clock I'd finally finished restoring. Every gear in perfect alignment, every mechanism precisely calibrated, working exactly as its creator had intended 135 years ago. I wound it carefully and listened to it tick. Steady, reliable, patient. And that's when I understood exactly how to repay them. Not with rage, not with hasty revenge, but with the same precision I'd applied to my architecture career, the same patience I used restoring timepieces, the same methodical planning that had built my successful development company. I'd dismantle their lives piece by piece, legally, cleanly, completely. They wanted to take everything from me? Fine. Let's see how they enjoyed losing everything themselves. 2 days later, I made the call. Mr. Sullivan's office, how may I help you? The receptionist's voice was crisp, professional. This is Robert Coleman. I'd like to schedule a meeting with Mr. Sullivan to discuss a potential collaboration between the Austin Architects Heritage Foundation and TechVision Solutions. There was a brief pause. Mr. Coleman, the architect, Mr. Sullivan has mentioned you. Please hold. Less than a minute later, Robert Sullivan himself came on the line. Professor Coleman, this is unexpected. I'd be honored to meet with you. Professor, he still called me that after 25 years. I remembered him vaguely. A quiet student who'd sat in the third row of my structural design course, always taking meticulous notes. Apparently, I'd made an impression. I appreciate that, Robert. I have a proposition that might interest TechVision, and I'd value your input. We scheduled lunch for the following week at a bistro downtown. Neutral territory, professional setting. Perfect. The morning of our meeting, I dressed carefully. Conservative suit, burgundy tie, the uniform of respectability. I brought a leather portfolio containing foundation materials, documentation of our 501c3 status, and buried beneath them a separate folder I might or might not need. Robert Sullivan arrived exactly on time. He'd aged well, a distinguished-looking man with salt and pepper hair, and the confident bearing of someone who'd built a successful career. We shook hands, and I saw genuine warmth in his eyes. Professor Coleman, I can't tell you how much your class influenced my career path. Your lecture on integrating sustainable design with commercial viability changed how I think about business. Please call me Robert, and I'm glad the lesson stuck. You've done well at TechVision. We ordered lunch, discussed the foundation, talked about the tech industry's growth in Austin. He was genuinely interested in supporting the foundation, mentioned potential sponsorship opportunities, technology partnerships for our educational programs. Then I shifted gears. There's something else I need to discuss, Robert. It's somewhat delicate. I paused, letting the weight of my tone register. It concerns an employee of yours, Craig Coleman. Sullivan's expression didn't change immediately, but I saw the subtle tension in his shoulders. Craig Coleman, is he related to you? My son. The color drained from his face, not dramatically, but enough that I noticed. I didn't know. He never mentioned. He set down his fork carefully. What about him? I opened the secondary folder. I debated whether to bring this to you, but I believe you deserve to know about a potential conflict of interest and misuse of company resources. I slid the first document across the table. Time-stamped emails from Craig's TechVision account discussing his plan to take over my house. Coordination messages sent during business hours. References to using connections to close deals. Ambiguous enough to be concerning, specific enough to raise questions. Sullivan read in silence. His jaw tightened. There's more, I said quietly. Craig knew I was his father. He knew about my connections in the Austin business community. He never disclosed our relationship to you or to HR. Given that TechVision operates in a field where professional relationships matter, this represents a significant conflict of interest. Why are you telling me this? Sullivan's voice was carefully neutral, but I could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. Because you showed integrity in my classroom 25 years ago, and I believe you still have it. Because if this situation became public, a senior sales manager using undisclosed family connections while simultaneously planning to exploit his elderly father, it would reflect poorly on TechVision's ethics standards. And because I met his eyes directly, I thought you deserved the truth before making any decisions about Craig's future with your company. I didn't threaten, didn't need to. The implications were clear. Sullivan was quiet for a long moment. I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, Robert. This is concerning, very concerning. He gathered the documents. I'll need to review this with our legal team and HR. Of course, I understand completely. We finished lunch with strained politeness. When we parted ways, Sullivan's handshake was firm, but his mind was clearly elsewhere. The call came 5 days later. Marcus Chow, my private investigator. Thought you'd want to know? Craig Coleman was terminated from TechVision this morning, escorted out by security. I felt a small surge of satisfaction. Official reason? Violation of ethics policies and undisclosed conflicts of interest. They're being vague publicly, but internally, it's about the family connection and misuse of company resources. One down. That same week, Marcus delivered another report, this one about Tara. Your daughter-in-law's been sloppy, he said, sliding his tablet across my kitchen table. She's been accessing confidential salary information through her HR position. Look at the pattern. She checks someone's compensation, then within days, there's social media activity showing she's met with that person. She's been using the information as leverage in social situations. I scrolled through the logs. Timestamps, access records, correlation with her social calendar. It was damning. Can you compile this into a report? Anonymous submission to her company's compliance department? Already done. Just need your go-ahead to send it. I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Send it. The foreclosure notice arrived at Craig and Tara's Del Valle house the following week. I know because Marcus kept tabs on their mailbox. Legal since it was visible from the street. Their mortgage payment was $4,870 a month. Without Craig's income, they couldn't make it. Their savings of $23,400 would last maybe 3 months if they stretched it. They weren't going to make it 3 months. Tara was fired 2 weeks after Craig. Internal investigation into misuse of confidential information. No severance, no references, just a clean termination for cause. I imagined them in that house, the one they'd bought thinking it was their ticket to easy living, watching their world collapse, unable to make the payments, unable to sell quickly enough to avoid foreclosure. Watching that $847,000 mistake become the anchor dragging them under. Meanwhile, Donald and Cynthia Sanders were having their own crisis. I knew from my network that they'd tried to help Craig and Tara financially. Tried and failed. Their retirement income couldn't cover their own expenses, plus their daughter's mortgage. I heard through mutual acquaintances that they'd put their townhouse on the market. Good. Let them feel the squeeze. Rachel called me during this period, twice. I let both calls go to voicemail. Her messages were predictable, asking for money, claiming the kids needed things, playing the grandmother card. I deleted them without responding. The chess club became my refuge during these weeks. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, I'd sit across from my regular opponent, a retired engineer named Howard, and lose myself in strategy. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, playing a game of calculated moves, while executing a real-life strategy that would leave my family in ruins. "You're distracted tonight," Howard observed after capturing my knight. "Everything all right?" "Family matters," I said. "Nothing I can't handle." He nodded knowingly. "Family's always complicated. My son-in-law tried to borrow money last year. Investment opportunity, he called it. I said no. Haven't heard from them since Christmas. I moved my bishop, setting up a trap 3 moves ahead. Sometimes no is the most important word you can say. At home, I continued restoring clocks. The 1890s mantelpiece was finished, ticking contentedly on my workshop shelf. I'd started on a 1920s Art Deco wall clock, all geometric lines and chrome details. The mechanical precision soothed me. Every gear had its place, every spring its tension. Systems worked when properly calibrated. Chaos resulted when pieces were out of alignment. My family had been out of alignment for a long time. I was simply correcting the mechanism. 4 months after the initial confrontation, Rachel called again. This time, I answered. Dad, please, I need to talk to you. Her voice was different, less entitled, more desperate. What is it, Rachel? It's Craig and Tara. They're in trouble. Real trouble. The bank's foreclosing on their house. They've both lost their jobs. Donald and Cynthia had to sell their townhouse just to help with expenses, and it's still not enough. I said nothing, let the silence stretch. Dad, I know you're angry about what happened, but this has gone too far. They're going to lose everything. Can't you help? Just this once. Help, I repeated flatly, like you were all planning to help me by taking my house and relegating me to a storage room. We weren't, she fumbled for words. We just thought it made sense for everyone to live together, to pool resources. Rachel, I have recordings of your text messages. Don't lie to me now. A sharp intake of breath. What? You texted Craig that once you moved in, you'd finally be able to quit working because I could babysit full-time while you focused on yourself. Does that ring a bell? The silence on her end was absolute. The answer is no, I continued. I will not help. I will, however, help my grandchildren with college when the time comes. Money set aside in trust, paid directly to their educational institutions. But you, Craig, Tara, you're adults. Time to face the consequences of your choices. She started crying. Real tears this time, not the manipulative kind. Dad, please. Goodbye, Rachel. I hung up and immediately blocked her number. 2 weeks later, Marcus called with news. The Del Valle house sold. Craig and Tara accepted an offer from an investor. How much? $485,000. I did the math instantly. They'd paid $847,000. Sold for $485,000. A loss of $362,000, not counting closing costs, realtor fees, and the months of mortgage payments they'd made. Catastrophic. Where are they moving? 2-bedroom apartment in Southeast Austin. Rents $1,450 a month. It's not great. I pictured Craig and Tara in a small apartment, their grand dreams of living in my house replaced by the reality of financial ruin. No savings, no jobs, or at least no good ones. Credit destroyed. The life they'd planned evaporated like morning dew. Perfect. Then came the phone call I'd been half expecting. Donald Sanders. Robert, we need to talk, face to face. There's a coffee shop on Lamar, neutral ground. The whole family will be there. An intervention? I asked dryly. A conversation, tomorrow at 2. I should have said no, should have ignored them entirely. But curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see their faces, wanted to witness the full impact of what I'd done. I arrived at the coffee shop exactly on time. They were already there, clustered around a corner table like survivors of a shipwreck. Craig looked 10 years older, dark circles under his eyes, shoulders slumped. Tara's carefully maintained appearance had cracked. Her roots were showing, her manicure chipped. Donald and Cynthia looked diminished somehow, their former arrogance replaced by weary resignation. Rachel sat apart from the others, arms crossed defensively. I bought a black coffee and joined them. Thank you for coming, Donald began, his voice lacking its usual pomposity. We know there's been tension, misunderstandings. But Robert, you have to see that this situation has spiraled out of control. Craig and Tara have lost their jobs. Their home. Their home, I interrupted, was purchased under false pretenses after they attempted to steal mine. I fail to see how their current difficulties are my responsibility. Craig's hands were shaking, actually trembling as he gripped his coffee cup. Dad, I know we screwed up. I know we approached this wrong. But you've destroyed us. Completely destroyed us. I protected my property, I corrected calmly. Everything I did was legal. Everything you suffered was a consequence of your own choices. You got me fired, Craig's voice rose, drawing looks from other patrons. He lowered it to a harsh whisper. You went to my boss? Showed him private information? I showed him evidence of ethical violations, company policy violations, that you were using company resources to plan what amounted to elder abuse. Robert Sullivan made his own decision based on that evidence. Tara was crying now, makeup running in dark streaks. You sent that information to my company, too. You ruined both our careers. You ruined your own career by misusing your position to access confidential information. I merely brought it to the attention of the appropriate authorities. I pulled out a folder, I'd come prepared, and set it on the table. Since we're all here, let's be completely honest about what happened. I opened the folder to reveal printouts of their text messages and emails, the planning, the coordination, the explicit discussions of how to take over my house. Cynthia gasped when she saw them. Where did you get those? Texas is a one-party consent state for recording and monitoring communications. I was that one party. I turned to a particularly damning page. Tara, would you like to read what you wrote here? Once he's in that little room, we can make his life so uncomfortable he'll check himself into a nursing home. Tara's face went from red to white to gray. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. I turned another page. And Craig, we just have to wait a few years. At his age, anything could happen. Craig's hands weren't just shaking anymore. His whole body had gone rigid, face frozen in an expression somewhere between horror and rage. You weren't planning to share my house, I continued, my voice ice cold. You were planning to take it. And then you were planning to make my life so miserable that I'd either leave voluntarily or die conveniently, whichever came first. The silence at the table was absolute. Donald and Cynthia were staring at their daughter and son-in-law like they were strangers. Rachel had gone pale, her earlier defiance completely deflated. That's not, Craig started. It's exactly what it was. I closed the folder. And now you want me to fix the consequences? You want me to bail you out after you planned to steal my home and dispose of me? I stood up, leaving my untouched coffee on the table. Here's what's going to happen. You will never contact me again about money. You will never ask me for help. My grandchildren, I looked at Rachel, may visit me anytime they wish. But the rest of you, we're done. I picked up the folder. And if any of you attempt legal action, try to claim I've somehow wronged you, or spread lies about this situation, I will release every page of this documentation publicly, every text, every email, every recorded conversation. The whole city of Austin will know exactly what you plan to do to me. Donald's face had turned purple. You can't. I absolutely can. Test me. I walked out of the coffee shop into the bright afternoon sun, leaving them sitting in stunned silence. Through the window, I could see them starting to turn on each other, Donald gesturing angrily at Tara, Craig with his head in his hands, Cynthia crying. The family was imploding, and I had orchestrated every note of it. As I drove home, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not triumph, exactly. Not joy. Just a cold satisfaction, like a complex equation finally solved. They'd tried to take everything from me. Now they had nothing. And I was just getting started. The weeks following the coffee shop confrontation were almost anticlimactic. Almost. Craig, predictably, didn't give up. Desperation makes people reckless, and my son was nothing if not desperate. Through Daniel Griffin, my attorney, I learned that Craig had filed yet another lawsuit, this time claiming emotional distress and abuse of trust. They're grasping at straws, Daniel said during our phone call. The filing is barely coherent. Craig's representing himself now, can't afford an attorney. And our response? I'll file a motion to dismiss, along with a request for sanctions and legal fees. This is the third frivolous suit he's filed. The judge won't be sympathetic. He was right. The hearing lasted less than 20 minutes. The judge, the same Judge Barbara Martinez who dismissed the competency petition, didn't even let Craig finish his opening statement. Mr. Coleman, she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass, this court has entertained multiple baseless claims from you and your family over the past 4 months. Each one has been thoroughly documented as frivolous. This ends now. Craig's face went red. Your Honor, your father engaged in legal transactions to protect his property from what appears to be a coordinated attempt at elder exploitation. The evidence you yourself provided proves this. She turned to Daniel. Motion to dismiss is granted. Additionally, Mr. Robert Coleman is awarded legal fees in the amount of $8,500. Mr. Craig Coleman, you are hereby ordered to pay this sum within 90 days, or it will be garnished from future wages. Craig went pale. I watched from the gallery, keeping my expression neutral. $8,500 he didn't have. Another weight added to the crushing burden he'd created for himself. Furthermore, Judge Martinez continued, any future filings from you or your immediate family members regarding this matter will be subject to pre-filing review and automatic sanctions. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, Craig whispered. Outside the courthouse, I saw him slumped on a bench, head in his hands. Part of me, a very small part, felt something that might have been pity. But then I remembered the text messages, the plan to make my life uncomfortable, the casual discussion of waiting for me to die. The pity evaporated. Meanwhile, the Austin Architects Heritage Foundation was coming to life in ways that exceeded even my hopes. Philip Carter, one of my former students and now a successful architect, had helped assemble a board of directors, 6 other professionals besides myself, all committed to the foundation's mission. The transformation of my house into a functioning educational center took 2 months. The main floor became a lecture hall and gallery space. The second floor housed a research library and meeting rooms. My workshop, my beloved clock restoration space, was converted into a teaching studio for architectural model making. And in the back of the property, where the old garden shed used to be, I'd built something for myself, a cottage. 1,245 square feet, compact but perfectly designed. 2 bedrooms, a study, a terrace overlooking what was now the foundation's garden. Every detail calibrated to my needs, no wasted space, no excess. It was more home than that massive house had ever been. The foundation's official opening was scheduled for a weekend in midsummer. We'd invited former colleagues, current architects, students from the University of Texas Architecture program, even a few local journalists. The Austin American-Statesman was sending a reporter to cover it. The night before the opening, I stood in the main gallery, looking at the displays we'd set up. 42 years of my career, laid out in photographs, blueprints, models, projects I'd designed, buildings still standing across Austin, developments that had shaped the city's growth. It's impressive, Robert. I turned to find Philip Carter standing in the doorway. He'd aged well, 41 now, confident, successful. I barely remembered him from my classes, but he remembered me. Thank you for making this happen, Philip. Without your connections and expertise, you'd have figured it out anyway, he interrupted with a smile. You taught me that there's always a solution if you're willing to think creatively. You're living proof. The opening was everything I'd hoped. Nearly 80 people attended, architects I'd worked with decades ago, students who'd taken my courses. Even Robert Sullivan from TechVision showed up, though we both carefully avoided mentioning Craig. I gave a speech, talked about the importance of preserving institutional knowledge, of creating spaces where experienced architects could mentor the next generation, of building legacy rather than just buildings. They gave me a standing ovation. Afterward, as people mingled and toured the spaces, I found myself thinking about Craig and Tara in their small apartment, Rachel in her mall job, Donald and Cynthia in their diminished circumstances. They'd wanted this house. They'd plotted and schemed and planned to take it from me. Instead, I'd turned it into something they could never touch, something meaningful, something permanent. The irony was delicious. My cottage, my actual home now, was a revelation, smaller than I'd lived in for decades, but designed with precision. Every book had its place. My restored clocks ticked on custom-built shelves. The terrace caught the morning sun perfectly for coffee, the evening sun for scotch. I was paid a modest salary as the foundation's senior consultant, $3,200 a month, plus free housing and health insurance through the foundation's group plan. After a lifetime of building wealth, of chasing the next big project, this simplicity felt like freedom. The chess club became my constant. Tuesday and Thursday evenings, without fail. Howard and I had developed an easy friendship built on shared silence and strategic thinking. Your game's improved, he noted one evening after I'd checkmated him in 32 moves. I've had practice thinking several moves ahead. That family situation you mentioned months ago, resolved? Completely. He nodded, studying the board. Good. Life's too short to let people steal your peace. I smiled. If only he knew. But peace, I was learning, is never permanent when family is involved. Rachel showed up at the foundation one afternoon without warning. I was in the middle of a consultation with a young architect about sustainable design principles when I saw her through the window, climbing out of her car with both kids in tow. My grandchildren. I barely knew them. Emma, 11, and Jack, 9. Rachel had kept them at arm's length these past months, using them as leverage she never quite deployed. I excused myself from the meeting and met them at the entrance. Rachel? Dad! Her voice was strained. The kids wanted to see you. I thought maybe... She was trying manipulation again, using the children as a wedge. But this time, I didn't care about her motives. Emma and Jack were looking around the foundation with wide eyes, and they were innocent in all of this. Come in, I said. Let me show you around. Rachel hovered near the entrance, but the kids followed me eagerly. I showed them the architectural model workshop, let them examine scale models of buildings I'd designed. Jack was fascinated by the tiny details, the miniature doors and windows, the exact replicas of stone facades. Did you really build all these, Grandpa? The real versions, yes. These are just models to show what we planned. Emma was drawn to the blueprint collection. These drawings are so precise. How long did it take to make one? Days, sometimes weeks. Before computers, every line was drawn by hand. We spent 2 hours together. I made them hot chocolate in the foundation's small kitchen, answered their questions, showed them photographs of completed projects. They were smart kids, curious and engaged. Rachel watched from the doorway, arms crossed, trying to figure out my angle. Finally, as they were leaving, she tried her pitch. Dad, the kids miss you. I miss you. Maybe there's a way to fix this, to move forward. I looked at her steadily. The kids are always welcome here, Rachel, anytime. They can call me, visit, spend afternoons learning about architecture if they want. And me? You're welcome to bring them, but don't use them as leverage. Don't bring them here expecting I'll suddenly forget what you were part of. These children deserve better than being pawns in your schemes. Her face flushed. You texted Craig that once you moved in, you'd finally be able to quit working because I could babysit full-time while you focused on yourself. Don't lie to me now. She left angry, but the kids started visiting regularly. Every Saturday afternoon they'd show up, sometimes dropped off by their father, Trey, who nodded at me with something like respect. He'd seen what Rachel was, had divorced her because of it. We had that unspoken understanding. I taught Emma basic drafting techniques, showed Jack how to build scale models. They absorbed knowledge like sponges, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was actually being a grandfather. Meanwhile, Craig and Tara made one final desperate move. Through their new attorney, a young, inexperienced lawyer, probably working pro bono for the exposure, they filed a petition claiming the Foundation's creation was a testamentary disposition that could be challenged, essentially arguing that I'd given away my estate while still alive, which could be contested as I might have been unduly influenced or incompetent. Daniel laughed when he showed me the filing. They really don't know when to quit. What's our defense? Timeline. We have 5 months of documentation showing you created this foundation. Meeting notes, medical evaluations, consultations with multiple attorneys, financial advisors. You underwent 3 separate cognitive assessments, all showing perfect mental function. You consulted with tax specialists, nonprofit experts, estate planners. This wasn't a spontaneous decision. It was a carefully planned philanthropic endeavor. The hearing was almost boring. Daniel presented our documentation like he was giving a lecture. Medical records, meeting logs, emails with Foundation board members, correspondence with the IRS regarding our 501c3 status, architectural plans for the cottage that proved I'd been planning my living arrangements for over a year. Craig and Tara's attorney looked more uncomfortable with each piece of evidence. He'd probably taken this case thinking it was a slam dunk. Elderly man gives away valuable property. Family contests it. Simple. He hadn't counted on facing someone who'd spent his entire career planning complex projects and documenting every decision. The judge, a different one this time, Judge William Patterson, reviewed the materials with obvious irritation. Counselor, your clients are arguing that Mr. Coleman was incompetent or unduly influenced when he created this foundation. Yet I see evidence of extensive planning, multiple professional consultations, and repeated medical evaluations confirming his capacity. What, exactly, is your evidence of incompetence? The attorney fumbled. Your Honor, the timing of the foundation's creation, immediately before the family was set to move in with Mr. Coleman. You mean immediately before they attempted to seize his property? Judge Patterson's voice was dry. I've reviewed the related cases, including the documented communications planning this takeover. Your client's own messages demonstrate clear intent to exploit Mr. Coleman. The Foundation's creation appears to be a reasonable response to discovering his family's plans. He dismissed the petition with prejudice, meaning it couldn't be refiled. Ordered Craig and Tara to pay another $3,200 in legal fees. When I left the courthouse, I saw them sitting in their old sedan, a beat-up Honda that had replaced whatever they'd been driving before. Craig's head was resting on the steering wheel. Tara was crying. They'd spent everything they had trying to undo what I'd done. Every penny fighting legal battles they couldn't win, and now they owed me over $11,000 in legal fees they'd never be able to pay. The garnishment would come from Craig's wages at his new job, some low-level position he'd finally found. 10% of every paycheck for years. I drove back to my cottage, poured myself a scotch, and sat on the terrace watching the sunset. The Foundation's lights were on. An evening lecture series was starting. 23 architects gathered in what used to be my living room. From here I could hear the murmur of voices, the occasional laugh. Life, purpose, legacy. They'd wanted to take my home and reduce me to a servant. Instead, I'd created something that would outlive us all. And every legal attack they'd mounted had only strengthened my position, documented their malice more thoroughly, buried them deeper in debt and consequences. I raised my glass in a private toast. Checkmate. The months that followed were a study in contrasts. While my family spiraled into financial ruin and mutual recrimination, I rebuilt my life into something better than it had been before. The Austin Architects Heritage Foundation wasn't just a legal maneuver. It became real, vibrant, meaningful. The official opening happened on a warm morning in early summer. I stood in the main house, my former house, and watched as colleagues, former students, and local architects filed through the door. The living room where Craig had presented his takeover plan now hosted displays of historical Austin architecture. The master bedroom they'd wanted so badly, a library and study space with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, the kitchen where Tara had imagined me making their breakfasts, a communal workspace with drafting tables and computer stations. My cottage on the property was perfect. Smaller than the main house, yes, 1,245 square feet compared to 3,847, but it was mine. 2 bedrooms, a proper workshop for my clocks, a study lined with my architecture books. The terrace overlooked the main house, and I could watch the Foundation's activities while maintaining my privacy. I received a modest salary, $3,200 a month as a consultant, plus free housing and health insurance. After decades of high-pressure development work, the simplicity was refreshing. Meanwhile, Craig found a new job, junior sales associate at a small tech firm. Salary, $52,000 a year, down from $87,000. I heard about it through the professional network. Austin's not that big, and news travels. Tara landed work too, dental office administrator, $38,000 annually. Combined income before taxes, $90,000. Their previous combined earnings had been around $125,000. The difference might not sound catastrophic, but with their destroyed credit, the massive loss on the Del Valle house, and ongoing debt payments, it was devastating. They lived in that 2-bedroom apartment on the southeast side. Rent, $1,450 a month. I drove past it once, purely by accident, while visiting a supplier. Generic beige siding, cracked parking lot, the kind of place you live when you have no other options. Their dream of luxury in my Tarrytown house replaced by this. The poetry of it wasn't lost on me. Donald and Cynthia had sold their townhouse to help with Craig and Tara's expenses. It hadn't been enough. Now they lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in a less desirable area. Their retirement savings depleted, their social circles shrunken. I saw Cynthia once at a grocery store. She saw me too, turned away quickly and left her half-filled cart in the aisle. Rachel kept working at the mall. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd been telling people I was a cruel tyrant who destroyed his own children. But the story was out there, the real story with all its damning details. Most people knew what they'd tried to do. Sympathy wasn't forthcoming. But my grandchildren, that was different. They started visiting regularly. At first, Rachel tried to use them as leverage, dropping them off with pointed comments about how sad it was that families were torn apart. But the kids loved the foundation, the architectural models, the drafting equipment, the workshop where I restored clocks. My grandson, 11 years old, sharp as a tack, would spend hours watching me work on timepieces, asking questions about gears and escapements. My granddaughter, 9, had an artist's eye and loved sketching building facades. "Grandpa," my grandson asked one afternoon while I was calibrating a 1920s Art Deco clock, "why doesn't Mom bring us here? Why do we always come with Dad's friend's mom?" Rachel had started having another mother from school drop them off, unable to face me herself. "Your mom and I have some things to work through," I said carefully, "but that has nothing to do with you two. You're always welcome here." "She says you were mean to Uncle Craig and Aunt Tara." I set down my tools and looked at him directly. "What do you think? Have I been mean to you?" "No. You teach me stuff. You make time for us." He paused. "Uncle Craig never did that, even when they had the big house." Out of the mouths of children, the foundation thrived. By early fall, we had 37 members, retired architects, professors, graduate students. We offered weekly master classes, quarterly symposiums, a mentorship program connecting experienced architects with young professionals. The City of Austin awarded us a $45,000 grant for educational programming. Local media covered the foundation's opening, painting me as a visionary philanthropist. The irony was delicious. Craig had accused me of being selfish and greedy, yet here I was, giving away $1 million property for the public good. I worked on my memoirs in the evenings, not a tell-all about my family. That would be petty. Instead, a professional retrospective, 4 decades in architecture and development, lessons learned, projects completed, the evolution of Austin's skyline. Several former colleagues expressed interest in writing forewords. At chess club, Howard noticed the change in me. "You seem lighter," he observed after I executed a particularly elegant endgame. "Lighter?" "Less burdened. When you first told me about your family troubles, you carried it like a weight. Now," he gestured vaguely, "it's gone." He was right. The anger had burned itself out, replaced by something cleaner. Not forgiveness. I wasn't there yet, might never be. But acceptance. They'd shown me who they were. I'd responded appropriately. Now we all lived with the consequences. One evening I sat on my terrace with a glass of scotch, watching the sun set over the main house. Inside, a group of architecture students were having an animated discussion about sustainable urban design. Their voices drifted through the open windows, passionate and engaged. This was my legacy. Not a house passed to ungrateful children, but a living institution that would continue long after I was gone. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. "Dad?" Rachel. Her voice was different, smaller, less aggressive. "Hello, Rachel. I need to talk to you. Not about money," she added quickly. "Just to talk. Can I come by tomorrow?" I considered. "The kids can come any time. You know that." "I know. But I need to come alone. To apologize. Not because I want anything. Just because I should." The sincerity in her voice was unexpected. "Tomorrow at 2. My cottage, not the main house. Thank you." After she hung up, I sat with the phone in my hand, wondering if people could really change, or if this was just another manipulation. I'd find out soon enough. Rachel arrived exactly at 2, driving a different car than I remembered, older, more practical. She climbed out slowly, looking at the property with an expression I couldn't quite read. I met her at the cottage door. She'd lost weight, looked tired. The dramatic flair she usually carried had been replaced by something more subdued. "Thanks for seeing me," she said quietly. We sat on the terrace. I didn't offer refreshments, didn't make small talk, just waited. I met someone, she began. His name is Tom. He's a mechanic. Works on cars, gets his hands dirty, comes home exhausted. And he's good, patient. When I complain about work, he listens, but then he asks what I'm going to do about it. Not what someone else should do for me. What I'm going to do. She twisted her hands together. He doesn't let me play victim. And I've been playing victim my whole life, haven't I? I didn't answer. Didn't need to. I knew about Craig's plan. I was part of it. I told myself I wasn't, that I was just going along, but she looked at me directly. I wanted that basement apartment. I wanted free childcare. I wanted you to fix my life because I'd made such a mess of it. And when you didn't, when you protected yourself instead, I was angry. Like you'd betrayed me by not letting us use you. A tear rolled down her cheek. Tom asked me what I'd do if someone tried to do that to me. Take my home. Make me a servant in my own house. I didn't have an answer. Because we both know what I'd do. I'd fight back, just like you did. She pulled out her phone, showed me a text thread. These are the messages I sent Craig, the ones you have copies of. Tom made me read them out loud, made me hear how I sounded. Her voice cracked. I'm not proud of who I was, who I've been. Why are you telling me this, Rachel? Because you deserve to hear it. Not because I expect forgiveness. I don't. Not because I want you to fix things with Craig, or help us financially or anything else. Just because it's true. And you should know that at least one of your children finally understands what they did to you. She stood up. The kids love coming here. Tom brings them on Saturdays sometimes. Did you know that? He says you're teaching them to value hard work and patience. That's more than I ever taught them. They're good kids, I said. They are, despite me. She moved toward the steps, then turned back. I know I don't have the right to ask, but can I bring them sometimes? Not drop them off. Actually come with them, be part of their visits. I looked at her, really looked, saw the exhaustion, the genuine remorse, the first signs of actual growth. Trust would take time, might never fully return. But this was at least honest. You can come with them, I said finally. But Rachel, if you slip back into manipulation, if you use them as leverage, if you ask for money, or try to guilt me into anything, that door closes permanently. Understand? I understand. Fresh tears. Thank you. After she left, I sat on the terrace for a long time. Forgiveness was complicated. Justice was simpler. The Foundation's celebration event came on a crisp fall evening. 7 months since that confrontation in my living room. 7 months since I'd said those 3 words that changed everything. The main house glowed with light and warmth. Over 100 people attended. Architects, city officials, journalists, former students. I'd been asked to give a speech about the Foundation's mission and future. I stood at the front of the crowd looking at faces I'd known for decades. Philip Carter, my former student who'd helped with the initial property valuation, sat in the front row. Robert Sullivan was there too. He'd become a Foundation board member, and his company had donated technology for our design studios. 30 years ago, I began, I designed this house as a home for my family. I built it with care, attention to detail, and love. But homes, real homes, aren't just structures. They're purposes. They're legacies. And sometimes the greatest gift we can give isn't to individuals, but to communities. I saw my grandchildren in the audience, sitting with Tom and Rachel. They waved. I waved back. The Austin Architects Heritage Foundation exists to support people who've dedicated their lives to building our city, to preserve knowledge, foster mentorship, and ensure that the next generation has the tools and wisdom they need. This isn't charity. It's investment in our shared future. Applause rippled through the room. After the formal program, I gave the kids a tour, showed them the library, the workshop, the models of buildings I'd designed over my career. Grandpa, my grandson said, looking at a model of a downtown office complex I'd developed in the 90s. When I'm an architect, can I design something this cool? Something shifted in my chest. Not quite tears, but close. You'll design something better. Later, as guests mingled and the evening wound down, I stepped outside. From the street, I could see both buildings. The main house, alive with purpose and community, and my cottage, quiet and comfortable. That same evening, miles away in their small apartment, Craig and Tara received a letter from their bank. I heard about it later through Marcus Chow, who'd maintained occasional surveillance. Their credit score had bottomed out. The foreclosure, the job losses, the maxed credit cards, it had created a financial crater that would take years to climb out of. The letter informed them that they were ineligible for any home loans for the next 5 years. Minimum. Marcus told me Craig had stood in their cramped living room, reading the letter 3 times, then sat down on their second-hand sofa and put his head in his hands. Tara had cried. No dramatic outburst, just quiet, defeated tears. Their dream of owning a home, of living in comfort, of easy wealth, permanently deferred, maybe permanently impossible. I felt no joy in their suffering, but I felt no guilt either. They'd planned to steal my home, make me a servant, and, according to their own messages, wait for me to conveniently die or disappear. This was simply cause and effect, action and consequence, justice, not cruelty. As I stood on my terrace that final evening, the celebration lights fading in the main house, I thought about the long road that had brought me here, the months of manipulation, the elaborate trap, the methodical dismantling of their schemes, the legal battles, the cold satisfaction of watching their plans collapse. I'd protected what was mine. More than that, I'd transformed it into something meaningful. My phone buzzed. A text from my grandson. "Thanks for tonight, Grandpa. When can we come back?" I smiled and typed back, "Saturday. Bring your sketchbook." The house I'd designed 23 years ago still stood, still beautiful, still purposeful, just serving a different purpose than I'd originally imagined, a better purpose. I raised my glass to the evening sky, to justice served, to consequences earned, to life moving forward. They'd wanted to take my house and turn me into their servant. Instead, I'd created a legacy that would outlast all of us. I'd shown them, shown myself, that age doesn't mean weakness, that kindness doesn't mean doormat, that family isn't an excuse for exploitation. And I'd done it all legally, methodically, precisely, like restoring an antique clock, every gear in its place, every mechanism calibrated perfectly. The best revenge, I'd learned, wasn't cruelty. It was living well, having purpose, being free. I finished my scotch and went inside to my workshop. The Art Deco clock needed one final adjustment before it was complete, and I had all the time in the world. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.